Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. The SNP are up to it again. This time it's over trans prisoners. We all know they brought in this policy that allowed men who pretend to be women to be locked up with women, thus endangering women, particularly vulnerable ones. But now they have been forced to release paperwork relating to it, and so they've decided that they're going to redact everything. Literally everything. It's virtually unreadable. They don't want to tell you who said what to whom and why and when. They're mentioning no names. They're covering their arses. The reason is this policy, rushed in to try and appear virtuous, was so bad that now that it's come back to bite them, they don't want to take responsibility. And so names have been hidden to protect the guilty. We're going to take a look at this story, but it is just, again, another example of a cowardly, craven SNP government who daren't let people know the truth of what is going on. Here goes. So, SNP in extraordinary secrecy row as it fully redacts all correspondence about the controversial trans prisoner policy. The Scottish Government have been accused of extraordinary secrecy over a series of redactions it made, which hides all correspondence and input SNP ministers may have had on the Scottish Prison Service policy to not outright ban dangerous trans prisoners from women's jails. No, what they should do is ban all men from women's jails. Whether those men choose to pretend that they're women or not, I don't care. They are men, they will always be men, and they will always represent a threat, particularly to vulnerable female prisoners. And to lock these people up with these women is wrong. And I don't care what the man has done, he's still a man, he goes into the men's estate, and that is it. The Scottish Government have been accused of extraordinary secrecy as it was almost fully redacted documents about how it was involved in the creation of the Scottish Prison Service's controversial new trans prisoner policy. This was reviewed in 2023 after the scandal surrounding Adam. I'm not going to call him Isla Bryson, but you know he's mad. I'm not going to do it. Anyway, he was a convicted. Oh my God, they're calling him he. Look at this. He was a convicted double R of women who self-identified as a woman. Now, they have to call him he because it is illegal to put a woman into the male estate. Therefore, the fact he is in the male estate means he is legally male. He was eventually moved to the male estate with the SNP ministers tying themselves in knots to not. That's very complex, isn't it? Tying themselves in knots to not describe him as a man or a woman. And you remember and they couldn't. And then Nippy herself called him a him. Anyway, it was due to the connotations for their gender reform bill. They knew he was a man. They knew he'd committed this crime as a man, but they couldn't call him a man because it would screw with their bill. That's how bad the bill is. Anyway, this led to a review of the SPS guidance surrounding how it houses trans prisoners, with this being published in December last year. There's only one way of housing trans prisoners. You put them in the men's prison if they're men. If it's a trans the other way around, a woman who pretends to be a man, she goes in the woman's estate. Not a problem. But I guarantee there'll be more men pretending women than women pretending men. Anyway, it was roundly criticised by women's rights groups who pointed out that there was no outright ban on violent trans women being housed with other females. In England, any prisoner with male reproductive organs goes to the men's estate. But the process of self-identification is allowed in Scottish jails. England have got it right. England and Wales, anyway, have got it right. If you got you got the wee ball bag, you're in the men's estate. But I would even say, even if you don't have the wee ball bag, if your wee ball bag's been cut off and thrown in a bin, you still go in the men's estate because you are biologically male. Just because you've had a snip doesn't mean you haven't, you can't change sex. And the great thing is that you can do this now. There's no misgendering. There is no misgendering law, and we will come to this because there's a J.K. Rowling story coming up, and I'll save that for that story. So do hit the subscribe button. You don't want to miss the J.K. Rowling story. Anyway, all cases north of the border are subject to a risk assessment, which means there is a chance that a trans person, a man, convicted of violence against women could be placed in a jail with them. When you're putting men in a women's jail, it's going to be bad for all concerned. Not bad for the bloke. I mean, obviously he's going to get more sex than he can never shake a stick at. But it's pretty bad for the women. The Scottish Government have repeatedly insisted that their gender reforms, which allows trans people to legally change gender without the need of a medical certificate, have nothing to do with the policy, as the SPS is independent of them. But that, we know, isn't the case because the SPS answers to the Justice Secretary, therefore is not independent. The legislation was blocked by the UK Government, who showed sense to protect women. The trouble is, they've tied themselves up in knots. The SNP have tied themselves up in knots because they've kissed the ring of the Greens over this policy. They then know that they've got to follow through on all this. They've really got to follow through, even though they know everyone's against it. They know it's against common sense. They know it's a danger to women, but they can't be seen to act against it because the Greens threaten to walk. We now know the Greens will never walk under any circumstances. So you can just go, we're just dropping it. Nah, it's gone. Done. And that's it. And what are the Greens going to do? Walk? Don't think so. They haven't yet. Not going to. Anyway, SNP ministers have been accused of having a pathological opposition to transparency. They don't ever want the truth to be known. They don't want the people of Scotland, the people of the world, to know what they're doing. Everything has got to be covered, hidden, changed, lied. They'll tell lies about things that don't matter, just so they don't ever get in the habit of telling the truth. And so everything's got to be covered, isn't it? Anyway, this Freedom of Information request sent by the Scottish Daily Express was returned with over 1,500 redactions. Swathes of email were provided, but almost every word was redacted. We asked for all briefing notes, correspondence, including internal minutes held by the Scottish Government in regards to the review of the 2014 Gender Identity and Reassignment Policy by the Scottish Prison Service between September the 1st, 23 and the date of the FOI. But instead of supplying this in full, there were 1,712 separate redactions in 27 email chains, with the only information being provided was the organisation of meetings. A number of briefings were published, but the most up-to-date one, dating from the guidance was published, was fully redacted. What have they got to hide? What are they so ashamed of? What are they so scared of? Of the things that they've put down on this thing, so awful and degenerate, that they know that if the truth comes out, they're finished. And do they think that the next government is going to hide this or publish it to show exactly how filled with it the SNP are? The Scottish Tories have campaigned for the new SPS transgender policy to be urgently changed. Shadow Justice Secretary Russell Findlay told the Scottish Daily Express, even by the pitiful standards of the SNP secrecy, more than 1,000 redactions in one FOI response is staggering. The Nationalists tried to impose their dangerous self-gender ID policy regardless of the well-being of vulnerable women in custody, but it blew up when male-bodied Ara of women, Isla Bryson as they call him, was sent to a woman's prison. The new trans prisoner policy is just a reheat of the old one, which might help to explain the pathological opposition to transparency. They cannot dare allow the truth ever to come out. Policy group Murray Blackburn Mackenzie called for an urgent investigation by Holyrood into the secrecy surrounding the policy being implemented. The group said these heavily redacted responses reinforce the extraordinary level of secrecy around the development of the policy. They're never going to tell the truth, not unless you put the screws on them. Take them to some third country. Let the CIA question them vigorously with a bit of waterboarding. It's the only way you'll ever get the truth out of them. Or wait until the next government comes in, demands to see them, and then publishes everything. And they must. They must publish everything so that people know once and for all. Because you can guarantee that the reason this is covered up is because in there it will say this will represent a danger to women, but they're going to do it anyway. And that's what they're covering up. Coming up. Now, all these claims that these strange, weird men don't represent a threat, it's all rubbish. Adam Graham, the one we're talking about here, obviously clearly does. Attacked several women and whatever. Then you had the butcher of Montrose, wasn't it? What was his name? Andrew Miller. Andrew Miller, dressed as a woman so he could entice a child in a car. The child saying would never have got the car if it was a man. So this is what happens. And we know that these people are 12 times, by government's own figures, 12 times more likely to be sex offenders than normal people. So you must never lock any of them up with women. You must put them always in the male estate. But they do this because they think they're going to get an easier time. Well, let them dress as women, go in the male estate and see how hard it is. No pun intended. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button. Ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video. I will speak to you later. Bye.